From topping his med school class and mastering forensic science to engineering crime scenes so clean the FBI couldn't find a trace, Dexter Morgan's mind was the sharpest tool in the kill room. Let's break down how smart Dexter really was and how his brain made him one of the deadliest minds in television history. Starting with his academic intelligence. Before Dexter Morgan became Miami's most methodical serial killer, he established himself as one of the most academically gifted students in his field. His formal education and professional achievements created the foundation for everything that would follow, proving that his intelligence wasn't just instinctual, it was rigorously developed through years of intensive study and practical application. Dexter was in the top of his class in medical school and subsequently earned a degree in forensic science. His formal education included courses in biology, anatomy, chemistry, and mathematics. Medical school represents one of the most intellectually demanding educational paths available, with acceptance rates typically below 10% and requiring exceptional performance across multiple scientific disciplines. For Dexter to reach top of his class meant that he was competing against and defeating some of the brightest minds in the country. The transition from medical school to forensic science wasn't a step down, it was a strategic pivot that required mastering an entirely new field. With that, he demonstrated his knowledge on various topics, including history, anthropology, psychology, botany, philosophy, architecture, sociology, economics, religious lore, art, literature, law, and criminology. This breadth of knowledge suggests an intellectual curiosity that extended far beyond his professional requirements, indicating the kind of polymathic intelligence typically associated with gifted individuals. Dexter's professional competence at Miami Metro Police Department was exceptional. The fact that he could state exactly 2,103 cases without hesitation suggests a mind that cataloged and retained information with remarkable accuracy. His specialization in blood spatter analysis required mastering physics, fluid dynamics, and biomechanics at a level that few forensic analysts achieve. Dexter has a precise knowledge of his work field, and thanks to his interest in blood, he proficiently solves criminal cases. To Dexter, the blood doesn't lie. This expertise was innovative thinking that allowed him to reconstruct crime scenes with uncanny accuracy, often seeing patterns and details that escaped his colleagues. The academic rigor required for his position extended beyond textbook knowledge into practical application under pressure. Dexter also served as an expert witness in court proceedings and is certified to photograph crime scenes. Expert witness testimony demanded the ability to explain complex scientific concepts to lay audiences while withstanding aggressive cross-examination from defense attorneys trying to discredit his findings. This required not only deep knowledge, but the intellectual agility to think on his feet and communicate effectively under adversarial conditions. Even his colleagues recognized his exceptional abilities. Detective Mike Anderson judged Dexter to be an exceptionally good deductive analyst and wondered how a pro like him could stand working with Miami homicide chuckleheads. This professional recognition from experienced detectives suggests that Dexter's analytical abilities stood out even among seasoned law enforcement professionals, marking him as intellectually superior to his peers. Perhaps most impressive was his ability to maintain this level of academic and professional excellence while concealing his true nature. The cognitive load of simultaneously excelling in forensic analysis while planning and executing murders required compartmentalization skills that spoke to extraordinary mental discipline and organizational capacity. I think what made Dexter's academic intelligence so remarkable was how he weaponized it. Every piece of knowledge became a tool for his darker purposes. But formal education was just the beginning of what made his mind so dangerous, because his ability to plan and strategize would prove even more terrifying when applied to murder. Dexter Morgan's ability to orchestrate elaborate murders while maintaining his facade as Miami's most dedicated blood spatter analyst revealed a level of strategic intelligence that bordered on the supernatural. His methodical approach to killing demonstrated masterclass level long-term planning, risk management, and operational security that would make military strategists envious. Every aspect of his double life required systematic thinking that eliminated variables through methodical preparation. The pinnacle of Dexter's strategic brilliance emerged during Season 4's Trinity Killer investigation, where he executed perhaps the most complex psychological operation in television history. While Miami Metro hunted Arthur Mitchell, Dexter positioned himself as both the hunter and student, shadowing Trinity to learn his methods while simultaneously planning his demise. This required him to compartmentalize his official duties as a forensic analyst, helping the investigation while secretly conducting his own parallel investigation. This cognitive load of maintaining these dual perspectives, feeding information to his colleagues while withholding crucial discoveries, demonstrated extraordinary mental discipline and strategic foresight. Arthur Mitchell had operated undetected for over 30 years, perfected a killing cycle that spanned multiple cities and victim types. For Dexter to infiltrate this system required him to create an entirely fabricated identity as Kyle Butler, complete with backstory, motivations, and believable personal details. He researched Trinity's patterns, identified vulnerabilities in his routine, and slowly insinuated himself into Arthur's life. The psychological chess match between them required Dexter to simultaneously appear weak enough to be mentored while strong enough to be trusted, all while gathering intelligence for the perfect kill. Meanwhile, Dexter was juggling an increasingly complex personal life with Rita and the children. Season 4 showcased his ability to compartmentalize on multiple levels, managing crime scenes during the day, family dinners in the evening, and late-night reconnaissance missions tracking Trinity. The mental bandwidth required to maintain these separate identities without allowing them to contaminate each other spoke to cognitive abilities far beyond average intelligence. When Arthur discovered Dexter's true identity and threatened his family, Dexter's response was swift and decisive, proving his contingency planning had anticipated even the worst-case scenario. Perhaps most impressive was Dexter's creation and maintenance of his kill rooms, which represented applied engineering psychology combined with forensic countermeasures. Each location required careful selection based on isolation, accessibility, and disposal logistics. The plastic sheeting, table setup, and tool arrangement followed precise specifications developed through years of refinement. Every element served dual purposes, containing evidence while creating the ritualistic environment his dark passenger demanded. The fact that he never once left exploitable forensic evidence, despite dozens of kills, demonstrated systematic thinking that eliminated variables through methodical preparation. Dexter's long-term planning capabilities extended beyond individual kills to encompass year-long strategies for maintaining his cover. He cultivated relationships with law enforcement precisely because proximity to investigations provided early warning systems and influence over evidence interpretation. His romantic relationships served as strategic assets that reinforce his carefully constructed normal guy persona while providing emotional camouflage for his true nature. The sophistication of his planning showed in how he anticipated and prepared for multiple contingencies. When Paul Bennett returned from prison and threatened to disrupt his relationship with Rita, Dexter didn't simply react. He executed a carefully orchestrated frame job that sent Paul back to prison while appearing completely uninvolved. This required understanding Paul's psychology, predicting his behavior patterns, and creating a scenario that would naturally lead to Paul's downfall without any connection to Dexter. His strategic thinking even extended to crime scene analysis, where he would deliberately feed information to his colleagues at precisely the right pace to guide investigations towards his preferred outcomes. This required understanding of how his fellow detectives thought, predicting their investigative approaches, and subtly influenced their conclusions while appearing to be nothing more than a helpful forensic analyst. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation proved Dexter's most sophisticated strategic thinking when his own dumping ground was discovered. Rather than panicking, he methodically analyzed the investigation's progress, identified the key players, and developed multiple strategies for misdirection and evidence elimination. His ability to stay several steps ahead of both the FBI and his colleagues while maintaining his facade required strategic planning that operated on multiple timelines simultaneously. What made Dexter's strategic intelligence so terrifying was how effortlessly he maintained these multiple complex systems simultaneously. Like this deep dive into Dexter's brain? Make sure to subscribe. We've got more breakdowns on the way that cut even deeper. Dexter's mind operated like a master chess player, thinking 15 moves ahead, and he proved it every step of the way with his emotional intelligence and manipulation. Despite claiming to lack genuine emotion, Dexter Morgan did demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of human psychology that bordered on genius-level emotional intelligence. His ability to read people, manipulate their feelings, and maintain complex relationships while concealing his true nature required psychological insight that most trained therapists would envy. This systematic emotional engineering allowed him to hide in plain sight for decades while maintaining deep connections that served his purposes. The foundation of Dexter's emotional manipulation was his uncanny ability to understand what people wanted to hear and feel. When Rita confided her fears about their relationship, Dexter knew exactly how to respond with the right balance of vulnerability and reassurance. His marriage proposal came directly from studying an obsessive stalker's tactics, yet he delivered those borrowed words with such apparent sincerity that Rita never suspected their artificial origin. This pattern repeated throughout their relationship, Dexter constantly analyzing Rita's emotional needs and providing precisely the responses that would maintain her attachment without requiring genuine reciprocal feelings. His manipulation of colleagues at Miami Metro demonstrated even more sophisticated psychological awareness. With Vince Masuka, Dexter understood that casual deflection and dry humor would satisfy Masuka's curiosity without arousing suspicion. When Vince pressed him about his relationship problems, saying, "I saw Rita kissing another dude at Thanksgiving. okay? Dexter immediately responded with calm acknowledgement that Rita had already told him, instantly diffusing Masuka's concern and positioning himself as the understanding partner rather than the victim. The complexity of his emotional manipulation reaches peak during interrogations and suspect interviews. Dexter's forensic work regularly put him in contact with criminals and witnesses, and he constantly demonstrated an ability to make people comfortable enough to reveal crucial information. His colleagues noted his skill in this area, with Detective Mike Anderson specifically commenting on Dexter's exceptional abilities as a deductive analyst. This psychological manipulation made suspects trust him enough to incriminate themselves while viewing him as a sympathetic ally rather than a threat. Perhaps most impressive was Dexter's relationship management with his sister Deborah. For years, he successfully maintained the facade of a caring, protective brother while secretly using her police work to advance his own killing agenda. He provided just enough emotional support to keep her dependent on him, while carefully steering conversations away from topics that might expose his true nature. When Deborah finally discovered his secret in Season 6, Dexter's initial response was to deploy his most sophisticated manipulation yet, convincing her that killing Travis Marshall was an impulsive act of justice rather than the calculated murder it actually was. His ability to maintain romantic relationships while feeling no genuine emotional connection required extraordinary psychological insight. Rita later remarked that Dexter seemed to know exactly what she needed at every moment, which she interpreted as exceptional empathy rather than recognizing it as calculated observation and response. He studied her patterns, learned her triggers, and provided precisely the emotional feedback required to maintain her attachment without ever risking genuine intimacy that might expose his nature. The maintenance of his professional relationships demonstrated equally sophisticated emotional intelligence. His choice to date Rita, a mother with 2 children whose abusive husband was in jail, represented strategic selection rather than random attraction. Dexter chose Rita specifically because her trauma history made her less likely to demand emotional intimacy, while her status as an abuse survivor made his protective instincts appear noble rather than controlling. Even his manipulation of adversaries showed remarkable psychological acuity. When Joey Quinn began investigating him after Rita's death, Dexter understood that direct confrontation would only increase suspicion. Instead, he used Quinn's relationships with Deborah as leverage, allowing Deborah's loyalty to naturally create pressure on Quinn to abandon his investigation. This demonstrated strategic emotional thinking that considered multiple psychological variables and their interconnections. His understanding of motivations and weaknesses extended to reading people's deepest fears and desires. During interrogations, Dexter could identify which suspects were lying, which were desperate for approval, and which could be manipulated through flattery or intimidation. He tailored his approach to each personality type, becoming whatever version of himself would be most effective in extracting information or maintaining his cover. The sophistication of his emotional manipulation showed in how he managed multiple relationships simultaneously without any of them interfering with each other. His colleagues saw him as a dedicated professional, Rita saw him as a loving partner, Deborah saw him as a protective brother, and his victims saw him as either a trusted confidant or a righteous avenger, depending on the needs. What made Dexter's emotional intelligence so terrifying was how systematically he deployed these abilities. Every relationship became a chess game where you knew exactly which emotional moves would produce his desired outcomes. But even this sophisticated understanding of human psychology would prove secondary to how he dealt with the hardest part about being a serial killer: adaptability under pressure. Dexter Morgan's quick thinking in crisis situations revealed his high fluid intelligence and ability to improvise solutions under extreme stress. When his carefully laid plans crumbled or unexpected threats emerged, Dexter consistently demonstrated the cognitive flexibility to pivot strategies in real time while maintaining his cover. His performance under pressure separated him from methodical killers who relied solely on routine. Dexter thrived when chaos demanded immediate adaptation. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation represents the ultimate test of Dexter's adaptability, when his underwater dumping ground was discovered by scuba divers. 38 days after killing his brother Brian, 18 of Dexter's victims were suddenly exposed to federal scrutiny. This discovery threatened everything that he had built over years of careful killing. Rather than fleeing or panicking, Dexter immediately began analyzing the investigation's methodology, identifying key personnel, and developing countermeasures to stay ahead of both the FBI and his increasingly suspicious colleague, James Dokes. Sergeant Dokes presents a unique challenge that required constant tactical adaptation. Dokes was suspicious of Dexter from the beginning, questioning why a lab geek had studied advanced jiu-jitsu in college and expressing disbelief that someone of Dexter's apparent intelligence would settle for blood spatter work. When Dokes began following him, Dexter had to completely alter his operational procedures while maintaining the appearance of normal behavior. This meant developing new routes to avoid surveillance, creating false destinations to throw out pursuit, and even staging fake emergencies to provide cover for his movements. The pressure intensified when FBI Special Agent Frank Lundy arrived to lead the Bay Harbor Butcher Task Force. Lundy's methodical approach and psychological profiling expertise meant Dexter faced an adversary who understood the serial killer mentality. Dexter had to study Lundy's investigative methods while participating in the very investigation targeting him. This required extraordinary compartmentalization, analyzing evidence during the day while ensuring his own activities left no traces that would fit the emerging profile. When Dokes discovered Dexter's cabin and kill tools, the situation demanded immediate crisis management. Dexter's response demonstrated remarkable tactical thinking under ultimate pressure. He couldn't simply kill Dokes without raising suspicions, so he improvised a kidnapping scenario that would keep Dokes alive while providing time to develop a permanent solution. This required rapid problem solving that considered multiple variables: Dokes' police training, the timeline before he would be missed, and the logistics of containing someone who knew his secret. The Lila Tournay's situation showcased another form of adaptability when external factors threatened his carefully constructed plans. When Lila discovered his secret and became obsessed with him, Dexter had to navigate an unpredictable personality who didn't respond to his usual manipulation tactics. Her erratic behavior and willingness to burn down buildings meant traditional strategic planning was ineffective. Dexter had to rely on real-time decision-making and rapid response to her increasingly dangerous actions. During the Trinity Killer confrontation, Dexter's adaptability reached its peak when Arthur Mitchell discovered his true identity and threatened his family. The psychological warfare between them required constant tactical adjustments, as each tried to outmaneuver the other. When Arthur killed Rita as retaliation, Dexter had to process devastating personal loss while maintaining his cover story to investigators. This demonstrated emotional compartmentalization under the most extreme psychological pressure. His split-second decision-making during kills showed remarkable cognitive ability when situations deviated from his planned scenarios, whether dealing with unexpected witnesses, equipment failures, or victims who fought back differently than anticipated. Dexter consistently adapted his methods without leaving additional evidence. This required the mental flexibility to abandon carefully rehearsed procedures and improvise equally effective alternatives under time pressure. The Miguel-Prado relationship tested Dexter's adaptability when his attempt to share a secret backfired dramatically. When Miguel began killing people who didn't fit Harry's code, Dexter had to develop strategies to contain and ultimately eliminate someone who knew his methods and weakness. This required completely rethinking his approach to trust and partnership while maintaining the friendship facade that kept Miguel from becoming suspicious. Dexter survived because he adapted faster than anyone else. Hit that like button if you're seeing just how far ahead he really was. His ability to think clearly under pressure consistently saved him from exposure, but even more crucial to his long-term survival as both a forensic analyst and a serial killer was learning and self-improvement. Dexter constantly evolved his method throughout the series, demonstrating a high learning capacity that separated him from static criminals who relied on unchanging patterns. His ability to analyze his own performance, identify weaknesses, and systematically improve his techniques showed the kind of metacognitive awareness typically associated with superior intelligence. This continuous self-optimization allowed him to stay ahead of advancing forensic technology and increasingly sophisticated law enforcement methods. His kill techniques underwent continuous refinement based on practical experience and lessons learned from near misses. Early in the series, Dexter's methods were effective but relatively crude compared to his later sophistication. He gradually developed more efficient sedation techniques, improved his plastic sheeting arrangement for better containment, and perfected his dismemberment methods to minimize cleanup time and evidence traces. Each kill became a learning opportunity where he mentally cataloged what worked well and what could be improved for future encounters. The evolution of his disposal methods demonstrated remarkable adaptive learning. Initially, Dexter simply weighted body parts and dropped them into the Gulf Stream. However, when the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation discovered his dumping ground, he immediately recognized the flaw in his approach and developed new disposal techniques that eliminated this vulnerability. This showed his ability to learn from catastrophic near exposure and completely redesign his operational procedures based on new information. Dexter's response to advancing forensic technologies revealed his capacity for proactive learning rather than reactive adaptation. As DNA analysis became more sophisticated and crime scene processing evolved, Dexter stayed ahead of these developments through his professional position. He studied new forensic techniques during the day and immediately incorporated countermeasures into his nighttime activities. This required the intellectual flexibility to understand both sides of the forensic science equation, how evidence was collected, and how to prevent its collection. His self-analysis and introspection reached levels that most people never achieve in legitimate therapy. Dexter constantly examined his own motivations, behaviors, and emotional responses through his internal monologue. He recognized patterns in his thinking, identified triggers for his dark passenger, and developed strategies for managing his urges while maintaining his facade. This level of psychological self-awareness required exceptional metacognitive abilities and the intellectual honesty to confront uncomfortable truths about his nature. The improvement in his manipulation techniques showed systematic learning from social interactions. Early relationships, like his initial encounters with Rita, were somewhat clumsy. As Dexter learned to navigate normal human emotions he didn't naturally understand. Over time, his ability to read people and provide appropriate responses became increasingly sophisticated. He developed a repertoire of emotional reactions and responses that he could deploy based on situational analysis, essentially building a comprehensive database of human behavior patterns. His professional development at Miami Metro demonstrated continuous learning that enhanced both his legitimate career and his secret activities. Dexter actively pursued advanced training in forensic techniques, attended conferences, and stayed current with industry developments. This professional growth provided him with increasingly sophisticated tools for both solving legitimate cases and covering his own tracks. His ability to excel in his day job while using that knowledge for criminal purposes required remarkable compartmentalization and applied learning. Learning from mistakes became one of Dexter's most crucial survival skills. When Paul Bennett's shoe was left behind during their confrontation, Dexter immediately recognized his oversight and developed checklists to prevent similar errors. When Lila Tourney discovered his secret through careless behavior, he analyzed what went wrong and implemented new security measures for future relationships. Each near exposure became a case study that informed improved protocols. His adaptation to different victim types showed his remarkable learning flexibility. Early targets were relatively straightforward criminals, but as Dexter encountered more sophisticated adversaries like Arthur Mitchell or Miguel Prado, he had to develop new approaches. He learned to study each target's psychology, identify their specific vulnerabilities, and tailor his approach accordingly. This required moving beyond formulaic killing to dynamic, individualized strategies. The development of his emotional understanding represented perhaps the most impressive learning achievement. Despite claiming to lack genuine emotion, Dexter gradually developed a functional understanding of love, grief, anger, and other human feelings through careful observation and analysis. His relationship with Rita and his children forced him to learn behaviors and responses that initially felt foreign, but eventually became somewhat natural through practice repetition. His forensic knowledge continued expanding throughout the series, with Dexter incorporating new scientific developments into his work. Even after faking his death and spending years away from active forensic work, he retained and applied this knowledge in Dexter New Blood, showing that his learning had created lasting cognitive changes rather than temporary behavioral modifications. Dexter's remarkable capacity for continuous learning and self-improvement demonstrated intellectual abilities that went far beyond mere criminal mind. But the relationship between his intelligence and psychopathic nature led to another question, one that almost everyone found themselves asking. How much of Dexter Morgan's intelligence came from his psychopathy versus his natural ability represents one of the most fascinating psychological questions in the series. Research on psychopathy and intelligence reveals a complex relationship that explains both the source and application of Dexter's cognitive abilities. His dark passenger fundamentally altered how his mind processes information, emotions, and social interactions. Meta-analytic research reveals that a small but significant negative relationship between intelligence and total psychopathy, with correlations around R equals -0.07. However, this relationship becomes more nuanced when examining specific psychopathy factors. Primary psychopathy traits, particularly those involving interpersonal manipulation and emotional detachment, show different intelligence correlations than secondary psychopathy traits, involving impulsivity and antisocial behavior. Dexter exemplified the high-functioning primary psychopath, whose intelligence remained intact or even enhanced by his emotional deficits. The lack of emotional interference allowed Dexter to apply pure logic to situations where others would be compromised by fear, empathy, or moral uncertainty. Research demonstrates that psychopathic individuals show decreased brain activity in the right lateral basal amygdala and dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, regions crucial for emotional processing and moral reasoning. This neurological configuration enables Dexter to analyze crime scenes, plan murders, and manipulate people without the emotional static that typically clouds human judgment. Clecky's concept of mask of sanity requires exceptionally high social intelligence to maintain successfully. Despite claiming to lack genuine emotion, psychopathic individuals demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how emotions work in others. allowing them to mimic appropriate responses. Dexter's ability to maintain long-term relationships with Rita, Deborah, and his colleagues required constant performance of emotional reactions he didn't naturally feel. This cognitive understanding of emotion, combined with his analytical nature, created a form of emotional intelligence that was entirely intellectual rather than intuitive. The trauma that created Dexter's dark passenger may have enhanced rather than damaged his cognitive abilities through a process of adaptive specialization. Witnessing his mother's murder at the age of 3 forced his developing brain to create survival mechanisms that prioritize logical analysis over emotional response. Research suggests that early trauma can lead to hypervigilance and enhanced pattern recognition as protective adaptations. Dexter's exceptional ability to read crime scenes and predict human behavior may have developed as a neurological compensation for his emotional deficits. His psychopathic traits eliminate the cognitive interference typically caused by empathy, guilt, and moral uncertainty. While normal individuals experience mental conflict when considering harmful actions, Dexter's brain bypassed these emotional warning systems entirely. This allowed him to process information about violence, death, and human suffering with the same clinical detachment he applied to blood spatter analysis. The absence of emotional conflict freed up cognitive resources for pure analytical thinking. The requirement to maintain his facade demanded extraordinary metacognitive abilities, essentially thinking about thinking on multiple levels simultaneously. Dexter had to monitor his own behavioral expressions while analyzing others' reactions and adjusting his performance accordingly. This constant self-monitoring and social calculation developed his intellectual capabilities beyond what might have occurred naturally. His intelligence became weaponized through necessity, sharpened by years of concealing his true nature. Research indicates that successful psychopaths often demonstrate higher intelligence than unsuccessful ones, particularly in areas involving planning and manipulation. Dexter's ability to avoid detection for decades while maintaining professional success exemplified this pattern. His psychopathy provided the emotional detachment necessary for long-term strategic thinking, without being compromised by immediate emotional needs or moral concerns that derail less intelligent psychopaths. The systematic deficit, described by Klecki, the inability to emotionally understand the meaning of life as lived by ordinary people, paradoxically enhanced Dexter's analytical abilities. While he couldn't intuitively understand human emotions, he became exceptionally skilled at studying and categorizing them systematically. His approach to human psychology resembled scientific observation rather than natural empathy, creating a form of emotional intelligence that was more comprehensive and reliable than genuine feeling. Studies showed that psychopathic individuals often score higher on certain cognitive tasks, requiring emotional detachment, such as more reasoning problems, where emotional considerations would typically interfere with logical analysis. Dexter's ability to make life and death decisions based purely on his code without being swayed by personal attachments or emotional manipulation demonstrates this cognitive advantage in action. The neuroplasticity of his developing brain likely adapted to maximize the advantages of his psychopathic traits while minimizing their social costs. His intelligence became specialized for his unique circumstances, enhanced pattern recognition for identifying killers, superior emotional regulation for maintaining his facade, and exceptional strategic planning for executing murders without detection. What made Dexter's intelligence so remarkable was how his psychopathy both enhanced and focused his cognitive abilities. And while it seems like he's the type of person that couldn't exist in real life, he might not be as far from reality as we think. How Dexter's portrayed intelligence compares to actual documented cases reveals whether his character represents realistic genius or pure fiction. The average IQ of serial killers is 94.5, according to the Serial Killer Information Center, making Dexter's exceptional abilities remarkable by comparison. Ted Bundy represents the closest real-world parallel, with a reported IQ of 124 to 136. Like Dexter, Bundy used intelligence strategically, studying psychology, manipulating victims through fake authority, and representing himself in court. However, Bundy's intelligence was undermined by impulsivity and ego. His careless self-introduction as Ted provided investigators crucial leads, while Dexter avoided making such mistakes through superior emotional control. Dennis Rader had that methodical planning edge that was similar to Dexter's operational style, operating undetected for 3 decades while maintaining his community facade. However, Rader's downfall came from narcissistic hunger for attention, resuming police communication and sending traceable floppy disks. This showed that methodical intelligence without emotional discipline leads to exposure. The Zodiac Killer was a master of sophisticated cryptographic abilities, creating ciphers that resisted solutions for decades. However, his specialized intelligence appeared narrower than Dexter's comprehensive cognitive abilities, and his communications provided numerous investigative clues. The crucial difference between Dexter and real serial killers lies in emotional regulation. While real killers like Bundy, Rader, and Zodiac succumb to psychological pressures, ego, sexual compulsion, or recognition needs, Dexter maintained clinical detachment. His intelligence was enhanced by emotional deficits that eliminated vulnerabilities, destroying other high IQ killers. With all that in mind, where does Dexter's intelligence lie? Based on Dexter Morgan's demonstrated abilities across multiple cognitive domains, his IQ likely falls within the 130 to 140 range, placing him in the gifted to highly gifted category. This estimation synthesizes evidence from his academic achievements, strategic planning, emotional manipulation, adaptability, and learning capacity to provide a comprehensive intelligence assessment. Standard IQ ranges provide context for this estimation. Average intelligence spans 85 to 115, with 100 representing the population mean. The 115 to 129 range indicates above average intelligence, while 130 to 144 represents gifted ability found in roughly 2% of the population. Dexter's capabilities consistently exceed above average performance, demonstrating the systematic thinking and complex problem solving characteristic of gifted individuals. His academic excellence supports this range. Graduating top of his medical school class and mastering forensic science requires exceptional intellectual ability. Medical school admission alone demands IQ scores typically above 115, while achieving top ranks suggests capabilities well into the gifted range. His comprehensive knowledge, spanning multiple disciplines, indicates the intellectual breadth associated with higher cognitive ability. Dexter's strategic planning and methodical thinking demonstrates the executive functioning and working memory capacity characteristic of high IQ individuals. His ability to maintain complex long-term operations while juggling multiple identities requires cognitive resources typically found in the 130+ range. His systematic approach to problem solving and continuous self-improvement reflects the metacognitive awareness associated with gifted intelligence. However, IQ testing limitations must be considered. Traditional tests may not capture the specialized intelligence of psychopathic individuals, whose cognitive profiles differ from typical populations. Dexter's emotional deficits might actually enhance performance on certain IQ subtests by eliminating anxiety and emotional interference that typically impair test performance. Comparing Dexter to fictional genius characters provides additional perspective. Unlike stereotypical evil masterminds with implausibly high IQs, Dexter's 130 to 140 estimation reflects realistic gifted intelligence applied with exceptional focus and emotional detachment. This 130 to 140 range accounts for his demonstrated abilities while remaining within documented parameters for high-functioning individuals, making Dexter's intelligence both dramatically compelling and psychologically plausible. So he was smarter than Bundy, with the emotional control of a beast. If you got on his wrong side, you might find yourself deep in the Bay Harbor. But if you subscribe now, I'll see you next time with the real details on the cast returning for Dexter Resurrection. You don't want to miss it.